Yes, we will.
Okay.
Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 54th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority, New Delhi, as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Mahotsav is a 75-week-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking the celebration forward through a massive outreach campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, the People Can Eat. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos, highlighting one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 54 of the celebration, with the red panda as the species in focus and the Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Park as the zoo in focus. So joined in today to speak to us on the species is Dr. Sunita Pradhan. Dr. Sunita is a wildlife biologist currently with the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, Bangalore, and is a native of Darjeeling. She did her doctorate on the red panda, generating some of the early data and information on the species from the wild in India. Post her doctorate, she went on to work in our today's Zoo in Focus, which is the Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Park, for over a decade. Her work currently involves understanding human-wildlife interactions and biology of the socio-ecological landscapes of the Himalayas. She's currently also pursuing her work on zoonotic diseases in mammals and their management from a One Health approach. She will speak to us today more on the species in focus. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arundhati, and thank you very much, the Central Zoo Authority of India, for this opportunity. And I'm so honored to share this platform with Mr. Holechi, the director of Darjeeling Zoo. With that, I will start my presentation and share my screen. Okay. Okay. So, as we all know, we are here to talk on the red panda, the lovely species that it is. I am Sunita Pradhan, and I worked, as Arundhati has already said, that I work with ITRI, and I worked on the red panda many, many years ago. Like I started my PhD in 1994, and it's so wonderful to see the kind of initiatives that are being taken on the species and the kind of studies that are happening, and and that's exactly what I want to capture in this presentation today. So there isn't anyone who has seen a red panda anywhere, either in a zoo or in a picture or in its natural habitat, or never would disagree it being an attractive and a beautiful animal. I've seen almost everyone soften when you see a red panda in the zoo. I mean, it's so attractive and beautiful, the species. Hence, it is important for us to understand them better, for us to serve and protect them better. There are a surge of new information that's coming up, on the species by the day. And this is what I've tried to, bring forward in this presentation, the new information that's coming up and the new studies that are happening, and, the new researches that are happening on the species. So it's almost been 179 years since red panda has been known to the world. It's almost 200 years now. It was in 1825 that it was named as, it was the first red panda was, described, and it was named, scientific name was given as Elurus fulgens. This species was collected from the mountains of North India. And in 1902, there was another red panda specimen that was described, and And this was known as Alurus fulgens tiny. It was a specimen collected from Sichuan, China, and was described by Ulfield Thomas. And in 1988 and 1990, the species was listed as insufficiently known by the IUCN Red List. So, so that was the kind of by 1990 it was still very unknown. I mean the species was insufficiently known. But then now, when you see the red panda studies and researches that are coming up, you see a surge of information on the species in the last decade. There's this huge plethora of newly generated information on the species, and as I already mentioned, that I really want to capture and share some of these findings in this presentation. And for that, I refer to the very recent 7 publications, which from 2018 to 2022. So, so now, if you see that there is this yellow triangle, which I have in my slide. This is to indicate the past information, the traditional information that we had on the species, and so this was these are some of the very early accounts of the red panda. This was by Dr. Roberts of the Smithsonian Institution. He had given a very detailed account of the species in mammalian species. But then if you see at the distribution map, you will see a number of question marks, which clearly indicates that the species had not been known and that their distribution had not been known and needed to be confirmed. So that was the kind of state that red panda information was around that time. And then the red panda information started coming up, and I want to share this trajectory of knowledge generation on red panda. And for this, I will refer to one paper, by Karki et al. In Karki et al. 2021, and they have reviewed the 175 red panda papers and have come up with this trajectory of knowledge generation on red panda, and has been beautifully depicted in this graph. As you see that this information that came up is really towards the end of it, like the last decade. There's this surge of information on red panda that is coming up. So this graph is based on 175 papers, and if we go further into this, we will see that much of the information on the red panda came from captive studies, actually. So there was this 2010. They say that it are around 54 to 59% of the information was from the captive studies. I mean, the publications were from the captive studies. So in 2010 and 2020, there was this surge of publications, which I showed in the previous slide. But in 2018 to 2020, there were more publications from the wild as compared to that from the captivity. So there was this year, the trend of captive studies being more changed around 2018. So which means that there is a lot of studies happening in the wild also now. So now this study still further goes into seeing who were involved in the red panda knowledge generation, and then it is seen as usually the universities, research institutes, and the zoos, followed by other organizations and institutions. So what are the key themes studied so far? And then it is seen that around 59% of the publications are on biology of the species, followed by their diseases, their investigation on diseases and habitat distribution, followed by habitat and habitat distribution, then followed by population and husbandry. So this clearly shows that most of the publications are from captive studies and captive red pandas, and habitat and distribution is from the wild, and these are very, very baseline studies, like all across the range countries that's happening, and which is very, very important also. So how are the range countries contributing? So the range countries of the red panda, which is China, Nepal, India, Bhutan, and Myanmar. So how are they contributing to these researches, the studies, and information generation? And we see that around 43%, which is of the contribution is from China. So the China is the highest contributor in red panda research and publications, and followed by Nepal and India, Bhutan. We have very, very little representation from Myanmar. And most of these studies are actually conducted by institutions and organizations in the USA and the United States of America. So, and then now the paper also further sees into how long were these studies conducted for, and it sees that most of these studies are short-term studies, and very few of very long-term studies, more than 3 years. So 1 to 6 months are the studies which are maximum. And now I come to another yellow triangle, which means the traditional or the earlier knowledge that we had, and that is that of the subspecies of Alurus fulgens. Previously, we knew that Alurus, we had the red panda had two subspecies: the Alurus fulgens, the Himalayan red panda, and the Alurus fulgens tiny, the second the other subspecies, the Chinese red panda. However, now with these new publications, this information has completely changed. So Hu et al. In 2020, they declared or they suggested that the two subspecies, which were based on differences in morphology and biogeography, be declared as two species, as Alurus fulgens and Alurus steini. And this was based on their genomics, on genetic studies. They found that there was enough evidence to show that they were different species and not subspecies. So this brings in a complete change in our understanding of red panda, and these are very, very important information. So this is the Himalayan red panda, and this is the Chinese red panda. So they are now different species and not subspecies. And now I come to the third paper by Joshi et al. 2021. And then they actually go on to say that, also from their genetic studies, they go on to say that the Siang River in Arunachal Pradesh is the boundary between the Himalayan and the Chinese red panda. I mean, this is very, very interesting as far as India is concerned, because India is now, with this kind of studies and information, we now find that India is home to both the species of red panda in Arunachal Pradesh. So the species or the red panda, the east of Siang would be the red panda, the Chinese red panda, and the one that on the west of Siang would be the Himalayan red panda. I mean, this is quite interesting and for the red panda conservation in India. And then with that, I go to the fourth paper by Dowley et al. 2021, who goes on to say that genetic analysis of red panda samples showed that red panda population in the Himalayas and China were separated about 100 years ago. And they probably diverged due to glaciation events on the southern Tibetan plateau in the Pleistocene. And now I come to another of the triangle, which is the traditional knowledge which we have on the red panda distribution. We know a lot about red panda, the protected areas, holding the red panda. We know we have a lot of information because there is so much. There is so much, effort and put in there in the protected areas for conserving this red panda. Right, so there are around 20 protected areas in India holding the red panda across, and this is just an example of Sikkim that I've given. Similarly, the China has mostly around 30, and Nepal has some, and Bhutan and Myanmar, they all have protected areas holding the red panda. But then this paper by Thapa et al. In 2018 said that the existing protected areas actually hold only 28% of red panda habitat. And this is some kind of an information and finding, which is very important for management of and conservation of red panda. And then they said that the predicted habitat, of the red panda habitat, China held the highest habitat of the red panda with 60% or 63%. And Nepal is followed by Nepal, 15%, Myanmar, 9%, Bhutan, 9%, and India, 5%. So India has the smallest habitat, red panda habitat. But then these authors also found that India, although it has a comparatively smaller habitat, red panda habitat, but then the red panda, the Indian habitats were moderately highly suitable habitat. The proportion of the moderately highly suitable habitat in red panda was high as 56%. Which is quite a good information for India. And then when we have now talked about red panda being outside protected areas, like 28% is just protected area, which means a large chunk of red panda is outside the protected areas. So then with that, I go to the 6th paper by Bisht et al. 2021, who actually have studied red panda outside protected areas. And then they have a large number of findings, but then I chose to share these findings on the road being a kind of a demarcation for the home range of most of these red pandas. And which certainly meant that red panda, which certainly meant that the roads were actually barriers to the red panda home range expansion and home range expansion and their movement also. So the roads are barriers. That's what they found. So further, individuals moved quickly in areas close to roads, indicating an avoidance behavior. So they actually avoided the roads. They thought it was a threat, and they perceived the larger, proper paved roads as threats. However, they slowed down in the vicinity of pedestrian tracks. But however, if there are smaller tracks, human tracks, the smaller tracks, they slowed down in the vicinity of the pedestrian tracks. And there also was a positive correlation between track density and track crossing rate, supporting that red panda perceived pedestrian tracks, or the smaller tracks, not the road tracks, not the roads, but the smaller tracks, as less risky areas. So this has an implication on road going through red panda habitats. And this study was actually done through GPS telemetry. So they were able to understand the movement and lots of other information not possible through other methods. So with this, I also will go into the next paper by Bisht et al. In 2022. It's very recently published, and this is on dispersal of the red pandas. Like we know, I've always been very, very interested as to how red pandas disperse, after they are born, in the wild, how do the cubs disperse? So this was very, very interesting to know that cubs or the sub-adults dispersed around the mating season. So when the mating season begins, the cubs or the sub-adults, which would be around 8 to 9 months old around that time, following the winter solstice, they that's the time when they start dispersing. So that's a very important time. Time for the red panda life history, because they start dispersing, they start becoming independent, they start searching for new areas for them to go and uh, uh, and make their own. So the dispersing subadults traveled up to 24 kilometers away from their natal home. So that's what they found. And they were also found to occupy vacant spaces. I mean, any areas which were vacant were actually occupied by these subadult pandas, dispersing pandas. And this was another very, very interesting fact that this paper gave was around the males. It's about the male home range. The males actually started increasing their home range during the birthing and the cub rearing seasons. The females actually contracted their home range during the cub rearing season, but the males increased their birthing season during the birthing and the cub rearing seasons. And they had a reason for that. And when they increased their home ranges, they also occupied vacant spaces, any areas which were not used but were suitable habitats. They were occupied by the males, by the male. And this was speculated to have a reason, like, they were actually, what was happening was they were actually allowing the dispersing female subadults into these vacant spaces or into their home ranges, which they had sort of occupied and increased, and then so that they can increase their breeding chances. They were allowing the females, the subadult females, the dispersing females into that vacant home ranges, but they were deterring the dispersing males. So, so that was a strategy that they were using. And I found this was very interesting information on the red panda. And now there's yet another information that this paper also discussed was on site fidelity. In the wild, we usually get this kind of piles of red panda dung, and I'd always wondered what it was. In the earlier years when I was working, I'd always said, what could this be? It looks like a very communal latrine with many pandas coming and defecating at the same. But then this study finds that these are areas visited by individuals very frequently, okay, and they had particular kind of residence times. They stayed here for lots of a certain amount of time, which is known as residence time, and this they did because they were safe habitats and also good habitats. So this is very important from the management point of view and conservation point of view, that these kind of areas which had a kind of recursion and site fidelity was very important habitats for red panda, which they perceived as safe and good habitats. And now I come to discuss the conservation status of the red panda vis-a-vis the knowledge generation. So what's happening to red panda conservation status vis-a-vis the knowledge generation that's happening? So in 1988, the red panda was insufficiently known. In 1990, it was also insufficiently known. In 1994, it was listed by the IUCN as vulnerable, and in 1996 it was listed as endangered, and it was in 1900 and then in 2008 it was again listed as vulnerable. But then there were a large number of information on the trade and poaching of red panda, and lots of other threats that came to light. And then the red panda was again listed as endangered. So at present, the status of red panda is endangered. The recent upgrading of the species from vulnerable to endangered by the IUCN shows its degrading status in the wild. So it shows that the red panda is still very, very threatened. Red panda is included in CITES 1, which also shows that there is trade, poaching, hunting of the species. So there are, it has been estimated that there are red pandas less than 10,000 population in the wild. It's also Glaston et al. Information. And the population also has shown decrease by 50% over the last 3 generations. So the red panda the population is decreasing, and they are still threatened and endangered. So then that brings to the point to understand what the threats are. And for this also, I have included the information given by the 7 papers actually. So habitat disturbance and loss and fragmentation is always there, has been always been mentioned. Hunting and poaching is also there. Nearly 2/3 of the total red panda habitat in the entire range, of red panda, distribution lies outside the protected areas, which is relatively high risk of anthropogenic impacts and associated disturbance to the species. So it's important that to understand that most of the red panda habitat lies outside protected areas, and that is a kind of a threat to the species. The incidence of red pandas being attacked and killed by guard dogs and predation, this is also happening quite often, and it has been mentioned by many publications and papers. So what would be strengthened forest conservation? So, so the first thing that comes into mind is the long-term monitoring, and after which then it is also thought that it is very important to assess and monitor impacts of climate change on red pandas distribution, its habitat and survival, something which has not touched by many research studies. So this is a gap area, even if we are to look into the research and information generation of red panda. Then more genetic evidence and assessment on the newly identified 2 species is very important. Now that we have 2 species, that assessment of the 2 species is important and has vital implications for their conservation. So revised action plans are required or needed to consider their potentially different conservation needs. Maybe the red panda, the Himalayan red panda has a different conservation need, and the red panda, the Chinese red panda has different conservation needs. Maybe their threats are different, and I think the WHO et al. Paper, which I earlier mentioned, they have mentioned that the Himalayan red panda has lower genetic diversity, than the Chinese panda, than the Chinese red panda. And then they have also suggested that the Himalayan red panda be given more attention than the Chinese red panda. So then documentation of conservation actions and their effectiveness at the ground level, which will ultimately help plan future conservation and management programs. So whatever conservation actions are happening on the ground, maybe documenting the effectiveness would help plan future conservation and management programs. Protection strategies in areas protected, outside protected areas is very, very important and has to be looked into. And the paper by Thakur et al. has suggested cross-border collaboration by developing multinationals and multilateral species-oriented conservation action plans to support the red panda population in transboundary landscapes. So these are some of the recommendations that has come up for the red panda, for strengthening red panda conservation. And so with that, I almost come to the end of this presentation, and I would reiterate that red panda is a very unique species, a very taxonomically unique species. It's a carnivore, which is, which has taken up a herbivorous diet, is an example species in evolution. It is a habitat and a dietary specialist species, which needs special protection. And it has very, very precarious breeding characteristics, like it gives birth to very tiny cubs, which is very vulnerable in the wild, and and many of these things, and it is an exceptionally its exceptional attractiveness raises its potential as a flagship species. So it's a wonderful, unique, beautiful species which needs protection. It's very important that we know and understand more about this species so that we can serve this species better and protect this species better. With that, I come to the end of the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sunita, for sharing your work on the red panda and the current literature on the kind of work that has been done on the species in such a short span of time. We will take question answers for this session towards the end. We now move on to our Know Your Zoo part of today's talk. So joined in today to speak to us on the zoo is Dr. Basvaraj Valaichi, who is the director of the Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Park. So Dr. Basvaraj is an Indian Forest Service officer with more than 15 years of work experience. He has also ranked first in the All India exam for securing a position in the Indian Agriculture Research Institute, also known as IARI, from where he did his doctorate in genetics, for which he's also been awarded a gold medal for academic excellence. He has worked in the Forest Service when working in different protected areas post joining the service, and has been awarded the Wildlife Conservation Award in 2016 by the Government of West Bengal. And he will speak today to us on this zoo in focus, and over to you.
Thank you, Arundhati. It's a great pleasure having here. So we are celebrating 75 years of Indian independence in the banner of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, where in 75 weeks, 75 zoos and 75 species will be on focus. So this it's a matter of privilege for me that our zoo is this week we are conducting various outreach programs in this entire week, and I'm happy to be part of this discussion, and very pleasure to have Dr. Sunita Pradhan. She worked a lot in this zoo in red panda, which has helped in our understanding of the species and taking up various projects. So I'll start with what we are doing, like a brief introduction about our zoo and what we are doing with respect to red panda conservation, breeding, and also reintroduction. Yes. So this is the Padmaja Naidu Himalayan is focused on conservation of various species, and one of the main focus is on red panda. It's the only place where we are also doing conservation breeding and also reintroduction efforts, because the population of red panda is dwindling in the wild. So we are taking up special efforts to reintroduce genetically diverse population back into the wild to enrich the population. Just a brief introduction about the zoo. So Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Darjeeling is popularly known as Darjeeling, was established in 1958, 14th August. Earlier it was called as Himalayan Zoological Park. In 1975, late Srimati Indira Gandhi ji, then Prime Minister of India, dedicated this zoo in memory of late Srimati Padmaja Naidu, ex-governor of West Bengal, and the park was renamed as Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Park. The zoo is a pioneer zoo in conservation breeding of endangered eastern Himalayan species in India. So presently we have 41 species. Like all of these are like unique Himalayan high altitude species, and numbering 434. We have 19 species of mammals, 18 species of birds, 3 reptiles, and 1 amphibians. And this zoo is also specialized in having pheasants and taking up conservation breeding works also. We have conservation breeding of 6 indigenous pheasants and 4 exotic. So we are member of WAZA, World Association for Zoos and Aquariums, and also part of GIMS, Geological Information Management System. And the park, other than the zoo, we have 3 conservation breeding places. One is Old Conservation Breeding Center. It was established way back in 1980s. We have a satellite zoo and conservation, which is a conservation breeding center for herbivores and pheasants at Dawhill, and conservation breeding center at Topkedara for red panda and snow leopard. So in 2014, the zoo received Royal Bank of Scotland Earth Hero Award as a recognition towards the conservation breeding program undertaken by the zoo. So even though it is categorized as medium zoo, it is one of the leading zoo when it comes to its objectives of conservation breeding. So we are coordinating zoo for snow leopard, red panda, Himalayan wolf, Himalayan newt, satellite tragopan, and we are participating zoo in conservation breeding works for blue sheep, Bhutan grey peacock, Himalayan thar, Himalayan blood pheasant, Himalayan monal, and bleached tragopan. So these are the important species wherein we are taking up conservation breeding work. One is red panda, the is in focus today. Then snow leopard, Himalayan wolf, Himalayan newt, a small primitive species which is under great threat currently. Goral, blue sheep, Himalayan thar, Mishmi takin, and markhor. These are two species like very rarely found in the wild, but we are able to successfully breed them in our facility. And the pheasants, like indigenous species like RJF, Khalis, and Tamnish tragopan, and exotic species like golden pheasant, silver pheasant, and lady amrest. Now we are planning to take up conservation breeding for breeding. We have animal translocation, and also next coming year we are trying developing cryopreservation biobanking facility. Like we can preserve the gametes for future generation. Like even though if the animal is lost, we will be having its gametes which can be used for the future. So we are developing a MOU with CCMB and Central Zoo Authority. So we hope in the next year we'll be able to come out with this facility. And just importance of ex situ conservation as a Jew man. There are like ultimately conservation is in the in situ. We have to conserve it where it is, the species is. But there are a lot of problems, like there are insufficient efforts are insufficient to halt the decline of a species. In those cases, ex situ conservation measures come in hand. And in ex situ, adequate gene pool of individuals can be maintained using captive population, which can be reintroduced back into the wild, which we are doing with respect to red panda. And the knowledge of ex situ will be very helpful in situ conservation, because in many of the species like that too rare and elusive species like red panda, snow leopard, in the wild it is very difficult to take up researches and develop knowledge base. In there wherein the ex situ juice will come into play. We can understand the biological, ecological parameters, breeding necessities, behavior, habitat needs, what are the diseases. These things can be studied effectively in zoo facilities. This in turn will help in developing strategies, protocols, intervention measures for in situ conservation. So in situ, now earlier like in situ, ex situ, they were seen as totally two different areas. But now it is seen as a complementary conservation. One will help in others. So ex situ, it's a source for population enhancement and complementary conservation and genetic diversity utilization. I mean, many places, like because of small fragmented habitat, the genetic diversity get reduced, which where the animals from zoo can be introduced to complement it. But obviously, we have to take up so many precautionary measures before introducing. It is an important role in increasing numbers and reducing the extinction rate, and it will provide as a reliable and cost-effective hedge against extinction of a species in the wild. And outbreeding of native and alien populations, it can overcome inbreeding depression. And introduction of genetically distant individuals can restore genetic equilibrium back in the population. So just this is a broad what is conservation breeding. Like it is to propagation of endangered species by maintaining genetic viability, produce individuals to be released in the wild, and mitigate species extinction. And ultimate our aim is to provide viable population with maximum amount of genetic diversity retained. So with respect to coming to red pandas, Dr. Sunita Prasanna has already explained in detail. I don't want to go to repeat it again. So this is like a lesser carnivore, because it is, you can call it as a herbivorous carnivore. It has a the digestive system is similar to carnivores with a simple and a stomach and a short intestine. But major feed of red panda is bamboo, which is a herbivorous feed. So because of that, but from bamboo it get very little nutrition. So it has low metabolism rate. To overcome that, they spend most of the day eating, selecting most nutritious plant matter, such like tender leaves, shoots. So, and some of the important diet of red panda, other than maling bamboo in the wild, is small eggs, wild berries, insects. So just interesting facts, like it has a false thumb, which it uses to grab the Mali bamboo. A fluffy tail, which helps to, since it is arboreal, a fluffy tail helps to balance its movement in the canopy. And vigorous bamboo eater, and is an excellent climber. It's one of the very few species which can climb down from the tree, like head down. So very few animals can do that. And threats, Dr. Sunita Prasan has told in detail. Don't want to go into that. And how to differentiate pandas. This we developed in our zoo, like based on morphological characters, like by studying the details of the morphological picture from head, body, and tail, we can differentiate one individual from another. Then with respect to census and of red panda in the wild, so in West Bengal, red pandas are found in two protected areas, Single Hill National Park and Neura Valley National Park. But the census and counting of red pandas will be extremely difficult because of the terrain, dense forest, covered canopy, and pandas stay in the canopy most of the time, and overcast weather. Like people who visit these areas will know that most of the time weather is overcast and difficult to sight. And the pandas are so elusive, like whenever they perceive a threat, they climb to the highest place possible. So because of that, sighting will be very difficult. So still efforts were made. Dr. Bahugana, they indicated around 26 red pandas in Singalila, and Dr. Sunita Pradhan, she's here in 2001, indicated that there could be 32 red pandas in Singalila National Park. And now, after that, we've shifted to studies census through genetic analysis, which is more precise based on collecting the scat and genetic analysis. So in Lacon's lab, CCMB Hyderabad, they told that in Singalila there are 38 red pandas, and in Neora Valley 32. And Indian Institute of Science Education Research in 2020 indicated that 40 red pandas in the wild. So even though if considering the kind of extensive habitat which is present, these numbers are very limited. So and these are all fragmented and isolated population over the years, which could subject to inbreeding depression and leading to a narrow genetic base. Because of that, we thought like it is very important to develop genetic base. So we took up conservation breeding works. Uh, and Darjeeling Zoo is one of the first zoo which started conservation breeding of red panda way back in 1982, which initial phases like pandas were collected from the wild, which were injured and needed treatment. And in 94, two cubs were born, Basant and Amrita. And in 2002-3, we had 23 healthy population of red pandas, which were, and later we acquired from other countries also. And reintroduction of the red panda into the wild with captive ones started in 2003. I think Dr. Sunita Prasan was also present during that period of time. Two female pandas were released back in Single Hill National Park, and they were tracked with radio collars. And in 2004, one of them gave birth to a cub, which is itself is a great achievement when it comes to conservation breeding work. And we shared our pandas with Auckland Zoo, Gangtok Zoo, Sikkim, Nainital being a coordinating zoo. And from this year, our zoo is the stud book keeper of red pandas in India. Earlier, it was only Rotterdam Zoo which was managing the stud books. So founder populations of red pandas in our zoo in 1982, we had 4, and later we got pandas from Rotterdam, Germany, Spain, Belgium, Holland, and now also we have various acquisition plans going on. And just enclosures, like having right enclosure is very important for red panda, for any animal for that aspect. So we take utmost care in maintaining enclosures as much as similar to wild. Nobody can replace wild, but at least we can make it as close to the wild as possible. So population management. So we have day-to-day record of feeding, behavior, diseases, any abnormalities, and captive stock, like it is said, with Central Zoo Authority information, and updates are also sent to International Stud Bookkeeper Rotterdam Zoo, with whom we facilitate exchange programs, and analysis of genetic viability of the stock. was done with CCM by Hyderabad and ICR, this one, Indian Institute of Science in Kolkata also. So that we regularly check what is the genetic diversity which is present in our population. And record is updated in genes, and hormonal analysis is also done, which is also important to know its reproductive behavior and any physiological abnormality present. And coming to our conservation breeding works, so this is the aerial view, drone view of Topkedara Conservation Breeding Center, which is present in Sinchal Wildlife Sanctuary in an area of 5 hectares, which was established in 2013-14. It houses both the facilities provided for both snow leopard as well as red panda. So red panda augmentation currently we are taking up. It is a 5-year work of collaboration between Darjeeling Zoo and wildlife divisions of Gorumara and Darjeeling Wildlife Division. And we are planning to restock the declining population in both the protected areas. And our objective is to augment the number of red pandas in Singalila and Neora Valley National Park, mitigate threats, because there's no point in just reintroduction unless we don't mitigate the threats. If the threats are there, then we reintroduce and the pandas won't be surviving. So that also is being taken up by wildlife divisions and territorial divisions. And our plan is to develop expertise in rehabilitating zoo-bred captive red pandas in the wild and preparing detailed protocols for planned release of species with proper objectives. These protocols will be helpful for other zoos or even other species whatever the observations and protocols we develop will be useful. And now coming to the international collaboration, because when you talk about conservation, it can't be done by one zoo itself. So we need collaboration between different zoos and also between different countries also. Here under GSMP, Global Species Management Plan, we acquire exchange red pandas. It provides for the genetically and demographically suitable and behaviorally competent individuals we should be selected. We are doing with the help of GSM, our people this one, Kalis in Rotterdam Zoo. Holding potential supply of individuals is important, and indirect contribution like exchange of knowledge and technology will be useful. Useful. And GSMP provided genetically distant red pandas based on their stud book data, and also they provided the technical help. So in the program, we selected 4 individuals based on genetic relatedness, rather genetic distance, and also by studying the stud books of all these animals. So 2 females and 2 males were selected. We studied their heterozygosity, which like the more homozygous, it's not suitable for release. So we found we selected individuals with highest heterozygosity, and we studied relatedness between male and female. In this, we found that both any male, female, they are highly genetically unrelated. So they were selected for reintroduction. And the red pandas were selected based on heterozygosity, genetic relation, and we also calculated probable inbreeding depression if they breed among themselves and produce offsprings. Based on that, with least inbreeding depression, highest heterozygosity animals were selected. But one of the female died in the soft release facility because one and a half month there was extensive cold and snow. It could not cope up with the wild. Then we took up studies with IISER Kolkata, where in genetic assessment, habitat suitability analysis, model-based estimation of increase in the population depending on the reintroduction were done using IISER, which provided help for how to introduce and how many animals to be selected. And the threats to red panda population was also studied. And strategies of in situ ex situ conservation linkage were also planned well in advance properly. And habitat improvement works are simultaneously being taken up in Singalila National Park and Neora Valley. And selection of collars is extremely important because in 2003 we selected only VHF collars. This time, like over the years, like technologies have advanced, we have satellite-based collars, which are litter track iridium-based collars, and which has time release device, transmitter, antenna, battery, and foam. Then these have advanced GPS scheduling. We can schedule the GPS without even now also, and remote scheduling via GPS web services, which is low-tech web service, and it has VHF beacon. And with mortality function, if an animal dies, it gives the signal that the animal has died. And it has a drop-off device, like it will drop off once the animal dies or its period is over. And it has a feature called geofencing. We can preload the GPS. If an animal crosses that GPS, it gives a signal that it has jumped the geofence, so that we get an alarm. So now we have placed that geofence only for Nepal, because once it goes to other country, we get to know. Maybe we can intimate our counterparts there. But otherwise, within Darjeeling, it won't be a problem whether it is territorial forest or wildlife. So it has a battery life of 70 weeks, because since red pandas are 4 to 7 kilo animal, so we need a collar which is very light, 200 to 300 grams. And we don't have, if you enhance its lifespan, then the battery size will increase, which will disturb its day-to-day activity. So this is how it is programmed. Uh, and this is how we tested the collars. This is how a panda looks with a collar. So it doesn't disturb it much uh, day-to-day activities. And we monitor the animals through satellite-based collars through low-tech web service. And once we get the signal, physically on the ground, the animal is tracked using VHF collars. So this is in the corner. You can see the signals on now we are getting all the signals from soft release facility presently where the animals are. So this is how we get data from the collars, and we will get even date, latitude, longitude, altitude, DOP, temperature, what was the temperature, maximum and minimum temperature. So this is a very helpful information while monitoring and tracking the animal. So then now when we are planning for releasing animals back into the wild, we have to take care of its behavioral competency. Suppose we release and behaviorally it is not competent, then it won't cope with the wild. So for that, we over the period of more than 1.5 to 2 years, we induced behavioral competence. So enclosures were covered, like there was not much interaction with humans. Even the zookeepers used to enter only once or twice, and there was no fixed for entry time for the feed, because like pandas, any zoo animals, they associate zookeepers with food. Like whenever a person is going, they think that they are bringing the food. So we have to cut that barrier. So like people are going, but without then over the period of time, they stopped associating the zookeepers with food. So this is very important when we are taking up reintroduction program. And feeding enrichment method was designed to induce foraging behavior rather than stall feeding. And observations were continuously taken over the period of time. And now the animals were to be released in soft release facility. This is our soft release facility in Gairibas, in over a 1.74 hectare area. And similar one is we are planning to develop in Neora Valley also. And we have researchers, HUT, and field assistants. We have 2 researchers and 3 field assistants who are continuously stationed there and tracking the animals. Then feed intervention, since August 20, association with feed was provided, Jew was broken at Conservation Breeding Center by gradually reducing Jew diet and bringing it to 25% while keeping bamboo unlimited. In soft release facility, Jew diet was further gradually reduced to nil over the period of 21 days. And presently they are on natural diet, and we are observing them daily. And it is revealed that they are all fit and fine, and they have not lost vigor. And we have got even information that they have mated also. So that is also a good news in the future. And now to induce anti-predator and human associated threats, because like zoo is a very protected place and we take care of our animals, but in the wild they are like they have to face predators. Now our pandas should not go into the wild without knowing which are the predators that present. So we induced different kind of anti-predators. The biggest predator for pandas is leopards, dogs, martins. So we expose them to dogs like in a controlled place, facility, and expose them to leopards by smearing trees with the leopard's cat and urine. And because of that, they started becoming more alert. And foraging and vigilance behavior, more of this behavior is observed, rather than earlier they were relaxed, and vigilance was less in Jew, but with this they became more vigilant and defensive. So whenever they sense these kind of threats, they climb to the highest points. So now we have developed pre-release, post-release protocols, anti-predator protocols, security protocols, which will be of use in future programs also. So our soft release in 15th January, we released the pandas in the soft release facility, and in 26th March, we'll be releasing them back into the wild, and they will be monitored till 2023 end. So this is the back to the wild program, which was taken up in 15th January. These were released inside the soft release, and final release will be on 26th. So this was our team which worked for the program. And post-release monitoring, two researchers and field assistants will be continuously monitoring through satellite and VHF collars, and we'll be monitoring them approximately for 70 weeks. And we are also taking observations regarding their home range, behavior, feeding habitat, health, reproductive behavior, birth of offsprings, mating. All these will be are being taken up, and it will be done for next 70 weeks also. And we are taking up important researches also, like studying the gut microbiome of red pandas. What was the microbiome during in the zoo conservation breeding center, in the soft release, after releasing in the wild, because like gut microbes play a very important role in digestion and carrying diseases also. So that will be monitoring and taking up research with the help of CCMB Hyderabad. So now, because it's always important to continuously enrich our genetic diversity of the animals. So we need to constantly acquire animals from other places which are genetically distant. Otherwise, again, here also, like, we'll be going for slowly inducing inbreeding depression, which is not desirable, especially when it comes to reintroduction and conservation breeding program. So we are acquiring red pandas from Debrecen Zoo, Rotterdam Zoo, Halls Gap Zoo, Torongo Zoo, with in consultation with GSMP, and all these animals will be totally unrelated and genetically distant. And prophyletic measures is very important. Continuously in the zoo, every month we do scat study of all the animals for presence of parasites, and examinations of parasites is done through morphology and morphometry. And ascarid eggs are very common in red panda, and we have hemato kit to study all these. And if any infection is of clinical importance, then we will be taking necessary measures. And blood test is also done continuously. All the blood parameters are studied. Even biochemical tests are done for liver function, renal function, and all that. So if any abnormality is found which is of clinical importance, then we will take intervention measures. So this is one study which was done in the 1617. Like nutrition of animals is extremely important in the zoos. So red panda nutrition project was done, and it was found that all the pandas were of more than 7 kilos, which actually happens to be obese, even though they look very cute and plumpy, being mota pandas, but which is not desirable for their health and also for breeding and conservation breeding. So after this study, food was reduced, white bread was totally stopped, and amount of bamboo was increased rather than other more nutritious artificial feed. And we encourage them to have natural foraging rather than getting food at a fixed place. And after that, we constantly the weight is monitored. Now all our pandas are 4 to 5.5 kg, which is in the ideal range. So because of this, we can see that last 2-3 years the birth has increased. Now there were 7 births, 5 this year, last year 3 births. So because these kind of monitoring food and nutrition will be very important. Then weight of red panda is very responsive to change, because like they feed a lot of bamboo with low metabolic rate. Suddenly if you reduce the feed, it will get reflected in their weight very soon. So diet and weight of all animals in the zoo we are constantly monitoring. So this is red panda. Other than that, we have important program of snow leopard also, because like one of these, our zoo is the most successful and only breeding program of species in entire Southeast Asia. And snow leopard breeding started in 86, where we brought the animal from Zurich. Another pair was brought in from US in 89, and in 89 first successful birth of snow leopard took place in Darjeeling Zoo. Presently we have a full-fledged conservation breeding work with respect to snow leopards. So presently we have 11 snow leopards, and 2 pairs have mated. So maybe in a few months we'll be having a few more cubs also. And we have world's oldest snow leopard, so which also shows like our husbandry practices are good. And recently we took restocking of Gorals and RJFs in Mahananda Wildlife Sanctuary also, because this is also another reintroduction program we are taking up. Gorals, for the first time, it was done in West Bengal. Plans to expand our conservation breeding work with respect to different indigenous pheasants like Satai Tragopan, blood pheasant, monal also. So I would end with this slide. No amount of human ingenuity can bring back lost species. We have to conserve before it is too late. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving, for encapsulating such a large amount of information on the ex situ conservation and the kind of work that is being done in the zoo in such a short span of time. We will now move, though we're out of time, we will take up questions for this session as well. So, Dr. Sunita, we'll take up questions for your part. So the first question for you is that are there any morphological or visual differences between the Himalayan red panda and the Chinese red panda?
The Chinese red panda, they say has very distinct rings in their tail. That's a very distinctive differentiation between the two species. And the other one, the Himalayan red panda, would have very kind of not very distinct upward kind of rings on their tails. And they say that the Chinese red panda is slightly larger than the Himalayan red panda, and also the Himalayan red panda's white, the coloration of the white is a little more than that of the Chinese red panda. Those are the morphological differences between the Chinese and the Indian red panda and the Himalayan red panda. Sorry.
Right, ma'am. And the next question for you is that have there been any studies done on community involvement in the conservation of this species in its distribution range? And if yes, then do you feel that community engagement plays a central role in the conservation of the species in the wild?
Oh, certainly, yes. Certainly, yes. Community conservation and engagement of community in any, I think, species conservation is extremely important. That sort of really helps in the coexistence of the species and the human beings. And as far as red panda is concerned, I'm aware of community conservation, real community conservation, like, with the community people really participating in red panda conservation is in Nepal. They use their community forestry, those principles while engaging the community in conservation of red panda in the region, in the eastern part of Nepal. They're doing a pretty good job. Yeah, yes.
All right, ma'am. And the next question for you is that do you think rope bridges over roads can help red pandas diverse and interconnect between different areas? And has there been any study done where the potential locations has there been any study done where the potential locations that require rope bridges have been looked into in the northeast?
No, it hasn't gone so far, I think. There hasn't been such, very disturbing linear construction infrastructure in red panda habitats. Of course, there are a couple of them, a few of them, but it hasn't gone so far as to make bridges over the roads and all that kind of things. That it hasn't happened, and I hope it doesn't happen also. Because the study that I talked about showed that, the smaller paths are good enough for the red pandas. They are not very, not very threatened by the smaller paths. So I think if we can stick to the smaller paths rather than getting roads and then bridges inside the red panda habitat, instead of doing that, I think if we can limit our, pathways to the smaller pathways, that would be beneficial for the red panda.
Right, ma'am. And the next question for you is that how do red pandas vocalize? Are they loud, and when do they vocalize more?
Oh, vocalization. I mean, I think red panda vocalization is very, very weak. Like, it's just a small Twitter kind of vocalization that red panda has. And if I'm not wrong, Dr. Kolechi, it's mostly during the mating season.
Yes, yes.
Yes, it's mostly during the mating season that they do their this vocalization, and then a kind of a honk kind of a vocalization when they are threatened it. That's otherwise they don't have those loud roars and calls and all that. They don't have that. Yeah.
All right, ma'am. And the last question for you is that in terms of once the pandas breed, are they tree nesters, and what kind of trees they use as nests? And which species do you think should be preserved from deforestation and timber cutting for a conservation of the species? If there's any.
Red panda it's an arboreal animal, like it's largely an arboreal animal. They come down only to sort of eat or move somewhere or even to mate. Otherwise, it's largely an arboreal animal. So I would say that almost all the trees would be important for the red panda in their habitat. And when we've analyzed the habitat structure and habitat and need of the red panda, we've seen that a very high canopy of high density of bamboo and tall bamboos are very necessary for the red panda. And as far as the nesting is concerned, we've seen the red panda nests or build a nest in large trunk trees or even broken old trees, trees which are dead, but then they have the hollow. So I can't exactly say, or we can't exactly say that, it's which animal or which trees to be conserved, like almost everyone, each and every species of the trees would be necessary for the species. But there are a couple of other fruiting trees also, like the sorbus, and also these are some of the things that has to be looked into: the oaks, the sorbus, and even the silver firs and the birch trees, which they use very, and the vitex species, which they use quite regularly. Yeah.
So, right, ma'am, those were the questions for you. We now move on to questions for Dr. Basfaraj. So, sir, the first question for you is that being a habitat and dietary specialist, how does the zoo ensure near natural environment for the captive population that you have?
So when it comes to natural, first one is like food. So that is one of the important thing, because like when it comes to not just for red panda, for any other species, like replicating exactly what is given in what they get in the wild will be extremely difficult. So we basically, like, what are the requirements that can be met? So that will be taken care of with fruits, honey, milk, egg, so which will compensate for what is there in the nature. So coming there, like even in, we are planning to take up research work. So based on their gut, this one scat, like what all they are eating, like we would be giving 5 to 6 type of species, but in the nature they could be eating 40 to 50 species. Like even in soft release, like we are continuously observing, our people came up 2 days back, like they found that the one herb they are eating continuously. So we got that herb, like we are trying to get it identified and all that. So that work we are taking up. And also like making it natural, there are so many things. Like one is enrichment, which we do in all the zoos, like make it like it's a very good climber. Our moat and enclosures should provide for that. So even our enclosures are like near naturalistic, like the natural trees were preserved, which are important for the red panda, and enclosure was built around that. So that is there. And social behavior should be taken care of. So because like they're elusive, they are not very social animals. Just we keep male and female, we don't, they don't come together whole time. In the only in year during mating season, they give call and become social. So accordingly, like whatever the behavioral thing, that will be taken care of as much as possible. We are close to the nature. Obviously, we can't replicate nature, but our efforts will be making it as close to the nature as possible.
Right, sir. And the next question for you is that I think you mentioned this in your presentation, but anyway, how long do you monitor individuals post their release into the wild? And what happens to the collars once, like once the period is over, monitoring period is over?
Yeah, that's why I told you, because these can be controlled from here also. Like it depends, like capacity of the collar, because they're very small collars. Like when we are planning the collars, we have to search so many providers. Like the more pixels or signals we put in, the duration or the lifespan of the collar will get reduced. So now we have fed it one satellite signal per day. In the morning, 7 o'clock, we get the satellite signal and only 6 hours of tracking. So that with that, we can have the lifespan of collar 70 weeks. Now, if we get 4 pixel per day or VHF 12 hours, then its lifespan will be really reduced to 20 weeks. So now at least we want to have this breeding season we are covering, then next breeding season, so that we'll get a complete picture. We can monitor and get to know about at least two breeding period we want to cover. So we'll be able to track them for 70 weeks as of now. And once the lifespan of the collar is over, it drops off. We can collect it.
All right, sir. All right, sir. And so the next question for you is, I think it's in terms of release, that do you have any plan to release the red pandas in Borumura Wildlife Sanctuary?
No, we have to release them only where their natural range is there historically. So our target presently is Single Island National Park and Neura Valley, where present red pandas are found. Because like it's a very specialized individuals. Gorumara habit forest and habitat of Gorumara doesn't provide for help support the survival of red pandas. Like it needs maling bamboo, tall trees. So that is because Gorumara is a totally different landscape supporting totally different set of animals.
Right, sir. And I think the last one is a comment which I will just, kind of put it across. They said that the videos, is there any, what do you call, is there any future plan of installing live cameras in the enclosures like Vandaluru Zoo does?
We have cameras, but like for our monitoring. So even like when the lockdown was there, like these animals were showed online. So we have cameras for our monitoring.
All right.
So like people can have access of seeing them physically. So but
Okay.
many times we put up our videos in our social media like Twitter and Facebook.
Yes, that is mentioned, that they like
Yeah.
the videos that are put up on the social media. So I think those were the questions for both our parts of today's talk. And with this, we conclude our 54th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. And on behalf of Central Zoo Authority, I would like to thank both Dr. Sunita Pradhan and to you, Dr. Baswaraj, for taking
Thank
time
you
out
very
of your schedules and joining us for this talk that is there. And I would also like to thank the audience who have been with us throughout and have been sending in our questions. I would also like to inform them that we'll be back next week with our week 55 species, which is the Himalayan Thar, and the zoo, which is the Dhauladhar Nature Park, Himachal Pradesh. So do tune in for that talk next week from 4 to 5 p.m. on Wednesday. And as Sir has already mentioned, Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Park will be continuing the outreach activities to the end of this week. So if you're in Darjeeling, do go to the zoo and take part in whatever activities planned for the day. So thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.